The warning sirens echoed through Citadel Station for the third time that week. Commander stood in the observation deck, his four arms crossed tightly across his chest as he watched another battle unfold on the massive. His blue skin had taken on a darker shade, a sign of stress among the people. The sight before him was becoming too familiar, too routine in its horror. Three Galactic Council warships engaged a single ETH war mech. The mech was enormous, easily 3 times the size of the largest Council vessel, its body encased in armor that gleamed with an otherworldly sheen. The armor seemed to shift and shimmer, as if it existed in multiple places at once. Commander had read the science reports. The armor was made of a crystalline alloy that somehow existed partially outside normal space. The scientists called it dimensional phasing. He called it impossible. The Council ships fired everything they had. Plasma cannons lit up the void with streams of superheated matter. The bolts struck the ETH mech dead center, each impact brilliant enough to light up half the observation deck. The armor absorbed every shot. Not just absorbed, the science officers explained, but redirected the energy into dimensional pockets that shouldn't exist according to every known law of physics. One of the Council ships switched to antimatter missiles. 6 warheads streaked toward the mech, each carrying enough destructive power to vaporize a small moon. The explosions bloomed like dying stars. For a moment, allowed himself a sliver of hope. Then the light faded and the mech stood untouched. Its armor hadn't even scorched. The ETH pilot seemed almost bored. The mech raised one massive arm and fired a single kinetic round from a shoulder-mounted cannon. The projectile was crude compared to Council weapons, just a chunk of dense metal accelerated to extreme velocity. It punched through the lead Council ship's shields like they were made of paper. The ship broke apart in silence, its crew of 300 dying in an instant. Turned away from the screen. He had seen enough defeats. The remaining Council ships were already retreating, following the protocol established after the first dozen disasters. There was no point in losing more lives when nothing they did made any difference. The emergency council meeting convened an hour later in the Grand Chamber at the heart of Citadel Station. Representatives from 47 species filled the tiered seating that circled the central floor. Holographic displays floated above the assembly, showing star maps marked with red zones. The red was spreading. 3 weeks ago, the ETH had controlled only their home system. Now they held 17 systems and were pushing deeper into Council space with each passing day. Ambassador called the session to order. She was a member of a crystalline species that communicated through controlled resonances in their silicon-based bodies. Her voice came through translation devices as clear musical notes. "We have lost another battle," she said. "The Outer Rim territories are now fully under ETH control. Casualty estimates exceed 8 billion sentient lives." A murmur ran through the chamber. 8 billion was a number too large to truly comprehend, yet everyone tried. Each representative calculated losses for their own people, their own worlds. "We must find a way to penetrate their armor," continued. "I have called this session to witness a new round of testing. We have gathered weapons from across the galaxy. Surely one of them will succeed." The testing began immediately. A section of ETH armor recovered from a damaged mech was mounted on a platform in the center of the chamber. It was roughly 2 meters square and 10 centimeters thick. Under normal circumstances, such a piece of armor would weigh several tons. This piece registered 0 weight on standard scales. It simply existed, hovering slightly above the mounting brackets, held in place only by magnetic containment fields. The Navy presented first. Himself operated the controls for their graviton disruptor, a weapon that could tear apart matter at the molecular level by disrupting gravitational bonds. He fired. The disruptor beam struck the armor with a sound like reality itself tearing. Purple and black energy swirled around the impact point. The armor flickered, seeming to fade in and out of existence. Then the weapon powered down, its energy cells depleted. The armor remained perfect. The Prime, a species of advanced synthetics who had evolved from ancient machines, deployed their swarm next. Trillions of microscopic robots flooded toward the armor, each one programmed to disassemble matter at the atomic level. The swarm covered the armor completely, a writhing silver mass. Sensors showed the attempting to break molecular bonds, to pry apart atoms, to do anything that would compromise the structure. After 10 minutes, their power sources exhausted. They had removed exactly 0 atoms from the armor's surface. Ambassador stepped forward herself for the demonstration. Her people had developed resonance weapons that could shatter any crystalline structure by finding and exploiting its natural frequency. She generated a complex harmonic pattern, adjusting frequencies across 17 simultaneous bands. The armor began to vibrate. Hairline fractures appeared across its surface, spreading like ice breaking on a frozen lake. The chamber erupted in excited chatter. Finally, a weapon that worked, leaned forward in his seat, all 4 hands gripping the armrests. The cracks spread wider. Another few seconds and the armor would shatter completely. Then the fractures stopped spreading. They began to seal themselves. The armor's dimensional properties kicked in, drawing matter from parallel quantum states to repair the damage. Within 30 seconds, the armor was perfect again. Ceased her resonance, her crystalline body dulling with disappointment. She had come closer than anyone else, but close wasn't enough. The demonstrations continued for hours. The fungal spore collective, whose biology was so alien that most species couldn't look at them directly without experiencing nausea, presented biodisintegrators that could reduce organic and inorganic matter to component molecules. The armor ignored them. The beings of pure psychic energy who existed only within containment suits filled with noble gases, attempted to reality warp the armor out of existence through concentrated mental effort. The armor remained stubbornly present in this reality. A weapons engineer from the hive suggested kinetic weapons. Pure mass accelerated to extreme velocity. The council had tried this before, of course, but the engineer insisted his people had refined the concept. He demonstrated whether that could accelerate a 1-kilogram projectile to a significant fraction of light speed. The projectile hit the armor with enough force to crack a planet's crust. The armor's dimensional properties distributed the kinetic energy across multiple spacetime vectors. The armor didn't even ring from the impact. As the afternoon stretched into evening, desperation crept into the chamber. Representatives who had sat calmly hours ago now argued and shouted. Accusations flew. Why hadn't the military prepared for such a threat? Why hadn't scientists discovered this technology first? Why were the Eth so effective at war when the Council had spent perfecting peace? In the back row of the chamber, almost forgotten among the more prominent species, sat Captain Sarah. She represented Earth, the member of the Galactic Council. Humanity had joined only 3 standard years ago, and their membership was still probationary. They had been invited mostly as a courtesy after Earth scientists developed a functional faster-than-light drive, proving they had reached the minimum threshold for interstellar civilization. Sarah watched the proceedings with quiet intensity. She was a tall woman by human standards, with dark hair pulled back in a practical bun and brown eyes that missed nothing. She wore the uniform of Earth's United Space Force, a simple design of navy blue with silver trim that looked almost primitive compared to the ornate garments worn by other species. At 42, she was young by the standards of longer-lived species. Several council members had privately expressed doubt about humanity's decision to send someone so inexperienced to such important meetings. Those same council members had learned to ignore her. Humans were newcomers, primitives who had barely escaped their own gravity well. They had contributed nothing meaningful to any council discussion. Their technology lagged centuries behind even the least advanced council members. Their presence was tolerated but not valued. Sarah had learned not to mind the dismissive attitudes. She had grown up on Luna Colony, where Earth's children learned early that respect was earned through results, not demanded through pride. She watched, listened, and learned. And right now, she was learning that the galaxy's greatest minds were stumped by a problem that seemed to defy every solution they could imagine. The testing concluded as the station's day cycle shifted to night. No weapon had succeeded. The armor sample sat on its platform, unmarked and unbroken, a monument to the Council's failure. Ambassador adjourned the session with instructions to reconvene the next morning. Representatives filed out in small groups, their conversations hushed and worried. Sarah remained in her seat staring at the armor. Something about it nagged at her, a thought that wouldn't quite form. She had studied physics at Earth's military academy, had specialized in understanding alien technology after humanity's first contact. This armor was beyond anything she had encountered, but the basic principles had to make sense. Nothing was truly impenetrable. Every defense had a weakness. She thought about the resonance weapon, how it had almost worked. For that brief moment when the cracks appeared, before the armor's self-repair kicked in, something had changed. The armor had been vulnerable. The dimensional anchoring had destabilized. If the attack had been faster, if it had delivered more energy in less time, if it had bypassed the armor's detection and response systems somehow. An idea began to form, so simple that Sarah almost dismissed it as stupid. But the more she thought about it, the more sense it made. She stood and walked down to the central floor, approaching the armor sample. A prime guard, its synthetic body gleaming in the dim light, moved to stop her. "I just want to look," Sarah said. "I won't touch it." The guard hesitated, then stepped aside. What harm could a human do? Sarah circled the armor, studying it from every angle. She pulled out her handheld scanner, a device that looked crude compared to Council technology but got the job done. She ran every scan she could think of, recording data and making notes on her tablet. 2 hours later, she left the chamber with a theory and no idea if anyone would listen to her long enough to test it. But she had to try. Billions of lives depended on finding an answer. If there was even a chance her idea could work, she had to pursue it. She thought about her grandfather, who had taught her to skip stones across the river near their home in old Montana. She thought about human history, about hunters bringing down prey with nothing but rocks and good aim. She thought about physics, about chaos theory, about the unpredictable nature of natural objects. And she wondered if the galaxy's most advanced armor might have a weakness so obvious that only a primitive species from a backwater planet would think to try it. The next morning, Sarah requested a private meeting with Commander. She expected him to refuse. Instead, he granted her 15 minutes in his office. She suspected he was simply being polite, giving the human representative the minimum courtesy required by Council protocols. His office overlooked the docking bays, where ships came and went in controlled patterns. The commander sat behind a desk made of some dark purple wood from his, all four of his hands busy with different tasks. Two hands typed on holographic keyboards while another held a data pad, and the fourth gestured as he spoke into a communication device embedded in his desk. He finished his conversation as Sarah entered, all four of his eyes focusing on her. "Captain," he said, "what can I do for Earth today?" Sarah had prepared a speech, but something about the exhaustion in his voice made her abandon it. She went straight to the point. "I think I know how to break the ETH armor." Skin flickered from blue to a lighter shade, the equivalent of a raised eyebrow. "You think you know what the galaxy's finest minds do not?" "Not exactly," Sarah said. "I think my species knows something other species don't." She laid out her theory. The armor's dimensional properties let it redirect energy and distribute kinetic force. But those defenses required the armor to detect and respond to incoming threats. Every weapon tested so far had clear energy signatures. Even kinetic weapons followed predictable trajectories with calculable impact patterns. The armor's exotic physics could model these threats and counter them. But what about something chaotic? Something with minimal energy signature until the moment of impact. Something irregular enough that the armor's dimensional processors couldn't model or predict it. listened without interruption. When Sarah finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "You want to throw a rock at it," he finally said. "Not just any rock," Sarah corrected. "A natural stone, unmodified, irregular, formed by geological processes over thousands of years. Something with chaotic internal density variations and unpredictable aerodynamic properties." "We have tested kinetic weapons," reminded her. "Manufactured projectiles," Sarah said. "Perfect cylinders or spheres, uniform density, predictable ballistics. The armor can see them coming. A natural stone is different. Every throw creates unique rotation and tumbling. The impact point shifts microseconds before contact. The armor's processors won't be able to model it in time." "This is absurd," said, but his tone was uncertain rather than dismissive. "Sir, your resonance weapon almost worked. It destabilized the armor's dimensional anchoring, but the armor had time to compensate and repair. A stone arrives with almost no warning. If I'm right about the chaotic impact signature, the armor won't know to defend until it's too late." Drummed all 4 sets of fingers on his desk. "You understand how this sounds. We have tested weapons that can crack planets. You want to try a rock?" "Yes, sir." "And if you're wrong?" "Then we've wasted a rock and 5 minutes of time. If I'm right—" Sarah didn't finish the sentence. They both knew what it would mean if she was right. "Made a decision. I will arrange for you to access the testing chamber. You will need a stone from Earth." "Actually, any natural stone should work. The key is that it's irregular, not manufactured. But yes, I'd prefer one from Earth. I know how Earth stones fly." "I will authorize a courier ship." Stood, all 4 arms gesturing in what Sarah had learned was a sign of respect. "Captain, I hope you understand that if this fails, there will be consequences for wasting Council resources during a crisis." "I understand, sir." "And if it works," he paused, "if it works, you will have saved the galaxy with a stone." The courier ship took 4 days to reach Earth and return. Sarah spent that time in the testing chamber, studying the armor sample and reviewing her calculations. She ran simulations on Earth computers, modeling stone throws thousands of times. The data supported her theory, but simulations were just numbers. Reality had a way of proving theories wrong. Other council members heard about her request. Some found it amusing. The human wanted to throw a rock, how primitive. Others were insulted. Did she think herself smarter than the combined intelligence of the galaxy? A few, like Ambassador, were curious enough to reserve judgment. When the courier ship arrived with Sarah's requested stone, arranged for the test to be witnessed by key council members. If the human was going to fail, it would be a lesson in humility. If she somehow succeeded, it would need verification. Sarah held the stone in her hand, feeling its weight and texture. It was a river stone from the Madison River in Montana, not far from where her grandfather had taught her to throw. The stone was smooth from years of water flow, roughly oval, about 8 centimeters at its longest point. It fit perfectly in her palm. She had skipped stones like this across rivers hundreds of times as a child. The armor sample sat on its platform 50 meters away, the same distance used for all previous tests. Sarah could feel the weight of watching eyes. Commander stood nearby with Ambassador. A dozen other representatives observed from the gallery. Holographic cameras recorded everything. Sarah didn't make a speech. She didn't explain her theory again or justify her methods. She simply drew her arm back, stepped forward, and threw the stone using the same overhand technique her grandfather had taught her 30 years ago. The motion was smooth, practiced, efficient. Millions of years of human evolution had optimized every muscle and joint for this exact action. The stone flew true. The impact made a sharp crack that echoed through the testing chamber. For a single frozen moment, nothing happened. The stone bounced off the armor and clattered to the floor. Sarah felt her heart sink. She had been wrong. The galaxy's most desperate hope had been foolish human pride. Then someone gasped. Cracks spread from the impact point, racing across the armor's surface like lightning frozen in crystal. They moved fast, far faster than the fractures from the resonance weapon. The armor's dimensional anchoring destabilized, unable to shunt the kinetic energy because the stone's impact signature had been invisible until contact. The exotic physics that made the armor invincible couldn't process chaos quickly enough. The armor shattered. Pieces fell to the platform, breaking into smaller fragments. The fragments sublimated, losing cohesion as their quantum states collapsed. Within seconds, nothing remained but a faint shimmer in the air that faded to nothing. The chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives shouted in multiple languages, their translation devices creating a cacophony of overlapping voices. Commander's skin flashed through 6 different shades of blue in rapid succession. Ambassador's crystalline body resonated with a frequency that translated as pure shock. Sarah stood frozen, the echo of the impact still ringing in her ears. She had expected it to work. The theory was sound, the physics made sense, but seeing it actually happen, watching supposedly invincible armor shatter from a thrown stone, was different from believing it would work. "Again," commanded, his voice cut through the noise. "We must confirm this was not a fluke. Bring another armor sample immediately." It took an hour to retrieve and mount another piece of armor. During that time, scientists swarmed around Sarah, asking questions faster than she could answer. How had she known? What was special about the stone? Could it be replicated? What made human throwing superior to manufactured projectiles? Sarah answered as best she could, but the truth was simpler than they wanted to believe. Humans had evolved to throw. No other species in the Council had developed that particular adaptation. Other species used weapons, but they gripped them, swung them, pointed them. The human shoulder joint, the specific rotation of the forearm, the flexibility of the wrist, the opposition of the thumb, all of it had evolved over millions of years to make humans the galaxy's best throwers. The second test began. Sarah threw another stone, this one from a beach in California. The result was identical. The armor shattered. Scientists demanded a third test, then a fourth. Sarah threw stones until her shoulder ached, and every single throw produced the same result. The armor, invincible against every advanced weapon the galaxy could produce, couldn't withstand a stone thrown by human hands. By evening, the testing chamber was crowded with representatives from every council species. They all wanted to see the impossible for themselves. Sarah demonstrated again and again, explaining the physics each time. The stone's irregular shape created unpredictable tumbling. Its natural formation meant density variations that no scanner could fully map. The human throwing motion delivered maximum kinetic energy with minimal pre-impact signature. All of these factors combined to create an attack the armor simply couldn't defend against. But the real breakthrough came when a scientist ran detailed scans of Sarah's throwing motion. The efficiency was extraordinary. A human throw wasted almost no energy. The motion converted muscle power directly into projectile velocity, with losses so minimal they barely registered. Millions of years of evolution had refined the process to near perfection. Other species tried to replicate the throws. They failed. A representative using all 4 arms couldn't generate the same velocity or accuracy. A warrior, incredibly strong, threw with power but no precision. The stone tumbled wrong, giving the armor time to respond. A prime synthetic, capable of calculating trajectories with computer precision, threw a stone that flew perfectly straight, too perfectly. The armor detected the predictable ballistics and hardened the impact point. Only humans could throw with the right combination of power, accuracy, and chaos. Only the human shoulder and arm, products of an evolutionary path unique in the galaxy, could deliver the precise type of kinetic impact that bypassed defenses. Ambassador called an emergency council session for midnight. Every representative attended, even those who usually sent deputies. The chamber buzzed with excited conversation. For the first time since the Eth invasion began, the mood was hopeful. Called for order. Captain has demonstrated a method to defeat Eth armor. We must now discuss implementation. Captain, how many humans are trained in this throwing technique? Sarah stood. All of us, Ambassador. Every human child learns to throw. It's as natural to us as walking. How many humans are available for military service? Earth's population is approximately 11 billion. Our military number's about 200 million, but most humans have basic combat training. We could field billions if necessary. The chamber fell silent as representatives absorbed the numbers. Billions of soldiers, all capable of throwing with lethal accuracy. An army that didn't need advanced weapons, just stones and human arms. Commander spoke next. This technique must be shared with all council species. We need to train our forces. Respectfully, sir, that won't work, Sarah said. We've already demonstrated that other species can't replicate human throwing. The biomechanics are wrong, but humans can teach other approaches. Slings, for example, ancient human weapons that amplify throwing force, trebuchets, catapults, low-tech solutions that work on the same principle. You're suggesting we revert to primitive weapons? A representative from the technologically advanced Pristine Collective asked, his tone incredulous. I'm suggesting we use weapons that the Eth armor can't defend against, Sarah replied. Their technology is designed to counter advanced weapons. They've optimized for energy weapons, antimatter, graviton disruptors. They never prepared for rocks. Resonated thoughtfully. The irony is significant. We have spent advancing beyond such primitive methods. Now we must return to them to survive. Not return, Sarah corrected gently. Adapt. We're not abandoning advanced technology. We're combining it with old methods. Use your sensors to target, your computers to calculate trajectories, your manufacturing to mass-produce traditional weapons. But at the core, use simple kinetic impacts delivered with chaotic vectors. The Council voted to implement what they called the Stone Protocol. Earth would provide military advisors to train Council forces. Engineers would study pre-industrial human weapons and adapt them for mass production. Scientists would analyze the armor's vulnerability to develop optimal attack strategies. But everyone knew the truth. Humans would lead the counteroffensive. Only they had the natural ability to throw with sufficient accuracy and power. Other species would support, but humans would fight on the front lines. Sarah left the chamber near dawn, exhausted but unable to sleep. She walked to an observation deck and stared out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Eth were still advancing, still killing. They thought themselves invincible. Soon they would learn that invincibility was relative. The most advanced armor in the galaxy had a weakness, and that weakness was as old as warfare itself. She thought about evolution, about how random chance and survival pressure had given humans a gift they had stopped appreciating. Throwing had once meant the difference between eating and starving, between living and dying. Humanity had moved past that, developed weapons and tools that made throwing seem obsolete. But evolution didn't care about obsolescence. The adaptation remained, coded into muscle and bone, waiting for the moment it would matter again. That moment had arrived. Humanity would save the galaxy with the oldest weapon in their arsenal. A stone, thrown with an accuracy born from millions of years of evolution, would shatter armor that could withstand antimatter. Sarah smiled. Her grandfather would have loved this. He had always said there was beauty in simple things, power in old ways. She wished he could see this moment, could know that the skill he had taught her, skipping stones across a river on lazy summer afternoons, had become the key to galactic survival. The stars shone cold and distant, uncaring of wars and weapons. But among those stars, change was coming. The Eth had tested every weapon the galaxy could produce. None had worked, until a human tossed a stone and shattered everything they believed about invincibility. The war was about to turn, and it would turn on the arc of a thrown rock and the strength of a human arm.